All right, students, so we're going to be answering these questions here. We're going to be doing word problems with the y equals mx plus b. And so we're going to go through these later towards the end. If this is throwing you off and you're like, I don't know how to utilize the formulas, you could jump to the end where I will give you a summary of what you could do in terms of the formulas. So we look at this question here, and what we could do is we could take a read at the question. I'm just going to go straight into it. So if you want to pause and read the question first, you could do that. Now, we're asked here to find the vertical intercept, and this might throw some people off, but just remember that vertical is really the letter y, and so when we have the y-intercept, it's the same thing as the vertical intercept. So what we're saying here is on the y-axis, where is the point? And we know that it's 8. So we're going to write b equals 8 because we're used to writing the y-intercept like that. Then for the second part, we're looking for the slope. Now for slopes, I do want to give you guys a heads up that you always should find a point that is right on the intersection. So don't do half points. Like sometimes they will be pretty close, like that right there. It looks pretty close. This right there looks pretty close, but it's actually not what you want. So ideally you would find a point that's given like this right here. And so we're gonna have to utilize this entire rise over run. But how do we find the slope? You know that is rise over run. One little shortcut is you know that if it is going upwards like that, then it's gonna be a positive number, just in case you're like, oh, I don't know if it's a positive or negative. But let's take a look at this, right? From the bottom up, we could do the counting, the y2, y1. We could do, so one method is you could write down the x-axis or x-coordinate right there, and the y-coordinate. So we have 8, and then we have the y-coordinate being 64, and then we have the other one right here, which is 0, 8, and then you could do the subtractions. Another way to do it is you could look at it visually. You're still going to do the same thing because you're going to be doing subtractions, but you're going to just, I think sometimes visually is nicer. That's the purpose of these graphs. So I know that the top here is going to be 64. I know the bottom here is going to be 8. And so what's the difference here? What is the rise? How much did I go up by? And so to do this, you could do 64 minus 8. And so you should be left with 6, 5, 56. So you have a rise of 56. And then for the going across here, it's 8 minus 0. So that's just going to be 8. So the m is going to be equal to 56 over 8. Or in other words, we could just say it is 7. So then the slope is m equals 7. Now, one thing that I haven't done yet is I haven't explained what this means. So when we're explaining it, we do want to say that what information does it give? It does say that $8, and we could keep it short. We don't have to have full sentences. It's saying that $8 is a fixed cost. So in other words, if you were to get a baby seat on there, then you'll have to pay the $8, but you could have the bike for as long as you want, and it will not change. Whereas for this one, you'll say that, let's see, okay. Price. So what does it tell? What does the slope tell us? The price of the bike increases by $7 per hour. And I am giving information that looks like it's already given in the descriptions, but that's the thing, right? Like this math is intended to explain concepts. It's not intended to complicate them. Like even though you count them, you calculate them, but it's made so that you could easily get information that you need. So that's going to be my answers for number 1 for A and B. Let's take a look at number 2. Very similar style here. All right, so we have the fixed salary of each person. All right, so let's take a look at the fixed salary. It does, like we know that it's going to be the y-intercept. So anytime, I hope you're making this connection, anytime you see fixed, that's going to be the y-intercept. That's going to be the number that doesn't change no matter what happens. So in this case, our fixed salary is we have Xavier, who starts at 300, and we have Nicole, who starts at 600. All right, just looking at the y-intercept, just tracing that there. Now, both Xavier and Nicole earned a % commission. So who gets the greater % commission? So now, per sale, who actually increases a lot more? And you could take a look at the slope right here. As you can see, the slope here is higher than Nicole's slope, so Xavier. All right, I'm just doing that by looking at it. If you are not sure because they're close by, you can calculate them. I'm not calculating it right now for this question because that's what we're gonna do right after this. So let's actually find the rate of commission. Well, we could find a point, a set point there. If there's a point like in between, like this right here, I think this actually can count. Sometimes I'm not too sure. Endpoints are sometimes a little bit more solid. Not always true, but there's something to consider there. So if I'm finding the rate, then I know that I'm going to be looking for the slope. So the M for, let's start with Xavier. I'm going to write it that way. M for Xavier is going to be 600 minus 300, which is 300 over a span of, let's see, the commission. Like, so he sells up to about $4,000 here. So 4,000. So it's going to be 300 over 4,000. All right, and I'll just write it at the bottom here. 300 over 4,000. Then you can start simplifying. So I'm going to get rid of the 2 zeros there. 3 over 40. And I think we could leave it at that number. That would be a pretty good number to leave it at. So it's about 3 per every 40 that he sells. Then for Nicole, take a look at the slope here. So we're going to ignore everything that's Xavier's. 800 minus 600 is 200, and it is for the 4,000. So in other words, she's going to get, so the M, actually I'll write down the top two, 200 divided by 4,000. All right. So M of Nicole is 200 over every $4,000 that she sells, which makes this 2 over 40, which makes this also 1 over 20. And so that's my answer for her there. So now I have Xavier's right here, and I have Nicole's right here. And sometimes you could actually leave it with the same common denominator, like 2 over 40, because then you could easily tell, like 3 over 40 is definitely bigger than 2 over 40, so Xavier makes more. It's a lot easier to tell that way. And last one, we have Sean and Timothy, or brothers. Now we take a look at the shape here, right? And it's going downwards like this. So we need to start associating that the slope is going to be a negative slope. You can do this through the calculations later. We're going to see this in a second. But let's find the vertical intercept of Timothy's graph and explain what it means. So right there, starts at 240. And so therefore, the distance of the house, right? We are talking about, so B is equal to 240, which means that he is, or Timothy is, or always starts. Let's do that. Always starts at 240 miles away. And then, so let's find the slope here. Okay, so this is the run, this is the rise, but this time the rise is going downwards. So we're gonna put negative 240 for the rise. And for the run, it's gonna be per hour. It's just gonna be 4 going upwards. So now M is equal to negative 240 divided by 4, which you do the math, it's going to be negative, and we're going to have 60. Now, what does it tell us about this situation? So we could tell here that Timothy gets closer to the house by 60 miles per hour. Now, you might notice that I'm not putting like negative 60 miles. That's because I'm putting the context of the story, right? I know that the negative actually symbolizes how much closer he's getting to his house. So, if I say that he's getting closer to the house, I could tell that through the story of my words, and I don't have to use the negative. In fact, the negative might not make that much sense. Now, right here, it says which brother is driving faster. That's because we have Sean. So we're given Sean as well. And this time he's given an equation. So the question is this going to be something that matches? Now, it's talking about driving faster, right? And so you have to determine, are you finding the slope or the y-intercept? And so driving faster is the slope. So now we know that for Timothy, he's going at negative 60, right? Timothy. And Sean is going at negative 50. So who's going to get home faster if they start at the same place? Well, you're going to see this right here, all right? So Timothy is faster because the slope is, now it's hard to write greater because technically the number isn't greater, a negative number is smaller, but we could say that the slope is steeper. So the steepness of the slope, remember, that's like in the first notes that we had, we talked about the steepness of the slope. It could be in the positive or negative direction, but the steepness is what tells us how fast the rate is changing. And that is it. So you could go ahead and take a look at this and try to answer it. Now, for that final piece, how do you summarize all this information, right? Well, you have y equals mx plus b. We know what they represent, but let's clarify something here. So b is usually fixed or constant. All right, it's a thing that doesn't change. So if in your story you find out that there's something that isn't changing, right? Like that will always be the same price, that will always be the same amount, it will always be the letter B. Now for the letter M, this is the rate of change. So changes are happening. This is going to be the rate of that change, right? How fast it is. And so steeper means faster, or a faster rate of change, and less steep means slower. Then this right here will represent the independent variable. So it's based on that rate of change, like how are you going to adjust it, right? So we talked about earlier in the example, we talked about the texting and how many texts you have will affect how much the final cost is. So the independent variable is the thing that changes, and it will affect your final answer or the total cost or time or whatever it is, right? So this right here is a dependent variable. Or it is also the total, which that one I think is a little bit more obvious, right? Like you got the total there. So I would say if you want to write this down and you want to have this as a guide to help you with any of the word problems, this is generally what you would want to see. When you answer, by the way, just make sure that the two that are on the bottom here, those should be a number answer. And the top here should be a letter answer. All right, so make sure that you double check your answers there. If the y or the x are replaced with other letters, that is totally fine. If not, you just leave it as y or x. The m and the b must always be a number. If they're not numbers, then you are not answering it correctly, or at least the answer is incomplete. So please make sure that you have all those sections covered. And one final piece is, I think what I'll do is I'm gonna turn this into another color just for those of you who might benefit from seeing something a little bit more visually. All right, so right there, and then this right here. So I'm gonna make this the same blue. All right, so think of it that way, right? Everything that is in the blue, it will be a number answer. Like, you must change those to numbers. And that is it.